Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we will build Agentic RAG with memory component using Phidata and Qdrant. You might be thinking, why do I need Agentic RAG when I can already build advanced RAG techniques, right? When you are building any application using LLM, you need better responses. For better responses, you need to have better planning and better reasoning. This is where agentic workflow excels well. So let's understand how you can build agentic RAG with an architecture diagram, which will make more sense. At first, you need to have a knowledge source. By knowledge source, I mean you can have any kind of data. It can be in form of PDF, CSV, YouTube, website, anything. For our demo, we will be using website URLs. And then for building the RAG component, you need to have a vector database and an embedding model. So embedding model is where you convert your text into embeddings. Once you have your data in embedding format, you save that in a vector databases. So whenever I as a user ask any question from a knowledge base, I can get the relevant information via search using knowledge base, which is your Qdrant. So what you need to do is you need to combine your website pages, embedding model and a Qdrant vector store. So combining all these three things, you have your knowledge base setup. So when it comes to agentic RAG, let me tell you what agents is in the first place. Agents are humans which can think and plan just like us. So in order to get these capabilities, you need to have an LLM which can reason well and it can plan the task for you. So you have a task, you decompose the task into subtasks, and in order to achieve this task to execute, you need to have action tools. So this is where you can have DuckDuckGo search as one of the action tool. This knowledge base is also one knowledge tool, right? So whenever I ask a query which is related to this website, what agent will do is it will take an action. Hey, this query is from knowledge base. I will look into knowledge base and then answer. Then if there is any general question, then agent will take an action. Hey, this query, it's a very general. I'll do a normal search. So I'll give you an example, right? So I have a documentation of Qdrant and I am asking anything related to indexing. So agent, once there is any user query which is related to indexing, it will look into knowledge base. So it is taking that action. If it is any general query like who is Virat Kohli, who is XYZ, that time it will look into the search, which is your DuckDuckGo search. So this is action. So you have set of tools and the agent will take the action, what tool it needs to use. One additional thing about agent is we humans have so much previous experience for our learning. So in order to implement that, you also have a memory component where all the conversation and chat history will be saved so that you can improve your LLM responses. So combining your memory, tools integration and a reasoning model for decision making, this is what builds a agentic workflow. This looks simple, but it's even more simpler for the code implementation thanks to the library called Phidata. So if you look at this Phidata GitHub repo, it's open source. It's very simple to use and it's just three major components. You need to have your model, you need to have a memory component, then a tools integration. Combining all these three, you have your agent. That's it. So let's quickly get with the code implementation. And also, if you want to get started with open source, right, this is one of the simplest library you can try out. So there is a cookbooks where you can add multiple cookbooks for the integration. So probably after this video, you can create a Qdrant cookbook and you can do a open source contribution. This way, you will gain the confidence of contributing to open source. And not just that, you can also add new LLM support, you can add new tool support. That way you will get that confidence. Hey, yes, I can contribute to open source. So look out for this GitHub repo, and if there are any new updates, you can also start the repo so that you can get the updates on what they are doing and you'll be updated in the agentic world. So let's try with the code implementation. And in order to begin, you need to install few libraries. For example, you need to install Phidata and the three components, which is OpenAI, DuckDuckGo search, and Qdrant client for your knowledge base. And then you have BS4. So the reason why we need BS4 is our knowledge source is a website URL. In order to fetch the entire data from a web page, you need to do the scraping, right? That scraping logic is written using BS4. Then you have SQL Alchemy. This is mainly used for memory integration, where I talk about SQL agent storage, right? This is the library which is required. So these are the dependencies that you need to install, and it's very simple to do if you know Python. Right. So now you just have to import few statements, which is from py.knowledge.website. You need to import website knowledge base. In this website knowledge base, you will be combining your Qdrant embedding model and as well as your website URLs. And once you have this, you also need to import the agent component and then the supported components, which is your memory, SQL agent storage from storage.agent.sqlite. Then you have OpenAI chat, which is your reasoning model. Then you have tools integration, which is DuckDuckGo search. I have also created a file, which is constants. Inside this constants, I've added all the credentials that I need. So for credentials, we have Qdrant URL, Qdrant API key, and then you also have OpenAI API key. So let me tell you how you can get your Qdrant URL and Qdrant API key. So I'll come back to the browser and I'll just open this particular dashboard of mine, which is cloud.qdrant.io. So once you come to this platform, you just have to click on clusters, create a new cluster. Once you name a cluster, you can copy your API key. So make sure to copy your API key because this is visible only for one single time. So once you create your cluster and get your API key, you will be able to see this endpoint URL. So this is what you need. One is the API key and one more is this URL. Once you have these two things, you are good to go. So let me come back to the VS Code and let's start with the code implementation. So the first step is I'm just saving my OpenAI API key inside an environment variable. And when you are building any vector databases, right? Vector database, you need to provide a collection name. It can be collection name or index name. So what this does is for each data, you can have a unique name. It's a unique identity. So I'll just create collection name and I will give it a simple name called Agentic RAG. That's it. So this can be anything. You can name whatever you need based on the data that you are providing. Since this video is related to Agentic RAG, I want to keep the collection name to be Agentic RAG. At next, I'll be using a vector DB. I need to define a vector DB, which is Qdrant. So talking about Qdrant, it's a very advanced vector database. What you can do is you can experiment this cloud services. When you're building RAG, right, you need to have better vector database so that your search is improved. Retriever is very important component. This is where Qdrant is one vector database which you can try. It has very advanced techniques. Like suppose if you have large number of documents, you need to index them. So they have few binary quantization, vector quantization, which can help you index data faster. So it can scale better, and this is very good solution when you have to use a vector database in your RAG pipeline. So let's get started with the Qdrant, where you need to define the collection name, and then URL equals to, I will copy this Qdrant URL. Sorry, it should be Qdrant URL. And once you define collection name and URL, you also need to define the API key. So it should be API key equals to Qdrant API key. So we are done with one component, which is the vector database. Now you need to bring the URL. So URL, it can be anything. What I'll do is I'll open one of the documentation of Qdrant. So the link will be qdrant.tech and it should be documentation. Alright, so this is the documentation page. What I'll do is I'll just click on one of a simple page. Okay, this is good. This page is good. I'll copy this URL. I'll come back and I'll paste it here. So this is one of the URLs that we'll be using. So this is the knowledge source. So this is your knowledge source from which you need to answer the query, whatever the user is asking. Up next, you need to define your knowledge base. You need to define a knowledge base. Knowledge base equals to, just copy this website knowledge base. And inside this, you need to give URLs equals to URL and then define your vector DB. Vector DB equals to, it's only vector DB. I have not renamed it anything else. And then there is one more variable called maximum links. And how much maximum links you need to have. I'll just keep it 10, which is the default value. So there are three things which is done now. One thing is we have defined our OpenAI API key inside environment variable. The second thing is we have defined Qdrant client. Third thing is we have defined a knowledge base. So if we come back to our diagram, this components is done. You have website URL, you have Qdrant, embedding model, by default it is OpenAI, so it's already done. So these three things is already done, as I said. And combining all these three things, you have your knowledge base. Now what we will do is, we will build our agent component. So this is what we need to build. Alright, so before we can proceed with knowledge base, let's make sure you load the data. It's very important to load the information so that you can create the indexing. So this will create the index for your knowledge base, and once you load the data, then only you proceed with your agent. So what do we need to provide the agent? First thing is, you need to have reasoning model. So we'll be using OpenAI chat, which we have already imported. And inside OpenAI chat, you need to define an ID. So ID is nothing but the model name. So we have GPT-4, we have GPT-4o, we have GPT-4o mini. So what I'll do is, I'll just define GPT-4o, that's it, which is the latest model, and it's good for reasoning. And then you need to have knowledge base. Knowledge base equals to knowledge base. So you just have to refer to this diagram. You have an agent, add your reasoning model, add your knowledge base. Now we will integrate memory, and then we will add a tool. So let's add memory. So for memory, you have a keyword called storage, and define a storage, just call SQLite storage. And inside this, you need to give a table name. So table name again is the unique name. I'll just keep it Agentic RAG itself. And then since it's a DB that you're creating, you need to save your entire conversation or history inside a DB. So you need to give that a name. So what I'll do is, I'll create a DB file, and I will give it a name called agents, or I'll probably tell Qdrant docs.db. So Qdrant docs.db is my database name where entire thing will be saved. And next thing is, I need to define a tool. So tools equals to, I'll just copy this DuckDuckGo. Alright, so as of now, we have our OpenAI chat, we have a knowledge base, we have storage, we have tools, and I'll also add 2 more additional components so that we can have better responses. So I'll just define markdown to be true, so that whatever response I'm getting, it's in markdown format. And since I am using a tool, right? When you're using a tool, you need to keep show tool calls to be true, so that you can see what is happening behind the scenes. Why this is very important? When I ask different queries, right? Let's suppose if I'm asking a question from my knowledge base, I want to see what tools is being used, whether it is a knowledge base or it is a DuckDuckGo search. If I'm using a normal query, like suppose who is Virat Kohli and so, then I want to see what tool is called. That time I want to see DuckDuckGo search. So these are the additional 2 things that you need to use. And if you are using storage, there is one more parameter. I told you it saves history. So what you need to do is, you need to tell add, it should be add chat history if I'm not wrong, or it is add history. Let me check the syntax. It is add history to messages equals to true. So yeah, these are all the components that we need. We need a model name, we need a knowledge base, we need storage, then you need a chat history component, then you need tools, markdown, and show tools calls. So once this is done, I'll create a response equals to agent dot print response. And you can take any user query. What I'll do is, I'll use a user query, and my simple question will be, what are the different indexing techniques? So this is a user query which is taken from the documentation, and I will simply ask this particular query, and I want to use stream. So what stream will do is, it will auto type your entire responses. That way you don't have to wait for the response to be generated. And Phidata, it's very cool library. You don't have to wait for the responses as well. So let me quickly run this code and check what is the responses. And one more thing, if you are using stream to be true, right, you don't have to print this in first place. It will auto type your entire response. So let's see what is the response. I'll come back to the terminal. And once I come to the terminal, I'll just run python app.py. So let's see what's the response. So it's loading the knowledge base. As you can see, what are the different indexing technique? This is what I want to see. It's specifically saying search knowledge base. That means it is taking a action of what tools it needs to use. In this case, it is search knowledge base, and then it is generating the entire responses. So as you can see, it's telling hierarchical navigable small world, which is HNSW. This is one of the indexing technique, which is also mentioned in their website. Probably if I search, so here you have indexing technique, and it is mentioning an HNSW, which is one of the indexing technique. So this is how you can build a agentic RAG for your own solution. So there is one more query that I wanted to try. Instead of what are different indexing technique, I'll just ask who is Virat Kohli. So it's pretty obvious you can't have Virat Kohli name in Qdrant documentation. So it needs to go to DuckDuckGo search rather than referring to knowledge base. So now if I print this, let me clear the screen and python app.py. In this case, it should use DuckDuckGo search. Okay, it's using search knowledge base. Probably it won't give me the response. Now if you see, it's going into DuckDuckGo search. That way it is making the decision where it needs to search. Previously, it didn't search into DuckDuckGo search. Now if you see, it's looking into DuckDuckGo search. That way it's giving you all the information that we need about Virat Kohli. So this is the power of Agentic RAG, where it can make the decision of what tools it needs to use, and it has better reasoning capabilities compared to just an LLM. So this is it from the video. You have your memory component, you have an Agentic RAG with just 30 lines of code, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, if I remove all these spaces, it's just 30 lines of code. And it's a very cool library. You can also start contributing to open source because there are so many cookbooks available. And obviously, when there are cookbooks, there are so many open source contribution as well. See you in the next video. Thank you.